Who are you? What's your role? And where do you work?
Hi, my name is Alex Kirkhope. I'm a Chief Architect in Akamai's Cloud. And I've also just recently been elected to the CNCF TOC, which is a technical oversight committee.
Now, what are 3 Kubernetes emerging tools that you're keeping an eye on?
So this might not sound super interesting, but observability has become so key in so many of the aspects that we need in order to scale our environments. So I've been doing a lot of looking at how we scale observability and also how this enables modern workloads like AI, which was actually the theme of many of the keynotes yesterday. The second thing that we're looking at, and again, I have to say this because of some of my heritage, which is some of the really amazing scale-out workloads, stateful workloads that we're seeing in Kubernetes. So some of these projects are not quite emerging. In fact, they're graduated. So we see projects like TIKV and kubefs, for example, which enable massive scale in Kubernetes, able to handle both amazing performance and amazing scale in terms of petabytes of data. And finally, I'm also keeping a close eye on multi-cluster and how multi-cluster can be managed, both in terms of managing workloads across hundreds or thousands of clusters, how you secure communications between the clusters, and how you make it simple to have services talk to each other across all of those different clusters.
Our podcast guest, John, mentioned that the Istio ambient mode trade-offs benefit most people, especially for use cases like enabling MTLS on Kubernetes. What's your take on implementing MTLS in Kubernetes?
So MTLS is one of those things which is almost a standard that is needed for just about every application. You want to be able to authorize which services can talk to other services. And so service meshes in general, whether it's Cilium or Istio, can provide those services and a transparent way of doing MTLS for you. And their control plane can effectively act as an authorization layer in enforcing those security policies. Of course, service meshes have traditionally been implemented with sidecars, and sidecars are complex and add a lot of overhead. In some cases, we've seen clusters where up to 50% of the CPU is just dedicated to those sidecars. So the new ambient mode in Istio and the transparent mesh in Cilium provide more efficient ways of getting the data across whilst maintaining the security.
Our guest Artem mentioned successfully setting up observability tools does not necessarily equal the value generated by the company. How do you ensure your observability implementation generates business value?
So it's really quite simple. I think no complex system can run without observability. There are just too many moving parts in a distributed system running on Kubernetes to do that without having some level of observability. And I guess the question is then figuring out how you integrate all of the metrics with the logs and the traces to get a full end-to-end picture of where issues might be happening in your system and being able to detect anomalies that might be happening in different parts of the system. But of course, the big problem is observability can be expensive. We can see, petabytes of logs sometimes being generated and millions of metrics being stored, and the cardinality can be huge. So the trick is figuring out early on, making the compromise between the metrics you don't even know you might need in future versus the metrics that you need to optimize for in order to manage and reduce the capacity of your observability system. So that your observability system doesn't become more expensive than your actual system.
David observed, companies are often afraid to put serious data into Kubernetes. What has been your experience, Alex, when running stateful workloads in Kubernetes?
I think you might know my answer on this. Stateful workloads should and could go into Kubernetes. I think by moving stateful workloads into Kubernetes, we get the benefits of the automation, the observability, the security policies, and the automated failover, but also the management of those stateful workloads at scale. Yesterday, we did a great talk. Loads of people turned up, and it was focused on stateful workloads in real use case scenarios. And we picked a number of different CNCF projects to give as an example, using, for example, Cloud Native PG, which is an operator and that can facilitate really complex topology deployments, where you can do replication and disaster recovery and other things which traditionally in normal VMs have been extremely hard to accomplish. And then we also looked at TIKV and running workloads where we generated, for example, 1 million RPS, and we're able to do that on a very small cluster in a very efficient way. And I think what this shows us is that we can use Kubernetes to facilitate the orchestration of those complex topologies, but we can also use it to facilitate the orchestration of topologies at scale for those shared and distributed workloads too. And of course, there are lots of other projects in the CNCF which provide these services both in databases, key-value stores, and hundreds of operators that enable this.
Kubernetes turned 10 years old last year. What should we expect in the next 10 years?
I think we're going to continue to see the expansion of the types of workloads that go onto Kubernetes. You know, it's probably fair to say that Kubernetes is already the de facto platform for orchestrating container workloads at scale. What we're already seeing now is Kubernetes being used to schedule batch workloads and AI and machine learning workloads. But I think what we're also going to see over the next 10 years is now, how do we manage all of these hundreds or thousands of Kubernetes clusters in an organization? And therefore, I think there will be a strong focus on multi-cluster in terms of how we manage and distribute workloads across all of the clusters, but also how we secure comms and services between those clusters.
What's next for you?
Well, I'm super excited to continue working on the roadmap for Akamai's cloud. I'm extremely excited to be contributing to the CNCF TOC and working with the ecosystem and much more closely with the projects as we continue to make Cloud Native ubiquitous.
How can people get in touch with you?
Probably the easiest way to find me is on the CNCF Slack. I'm there most days, so feel free to contact me there.